The neighborhood park was bustling with life on that perfect spring afternoon. The sun painted warm patches on the freshly cut grass, and children's laughter filled the air like music. Among the weekend crowd, a mother and daughter made their way toward the playground, their hands intertwined and swinging gently between them. Dr. Michelle Anderson had finally managed to get a Saturday off from her busy schedule at the Children's Hospital. Her 8-year-old daughter Lily had been asking to visit this park for weeks, especially after hearing about the new butterfly-shaped swings from her friends at school. Michelle watched with pure joy as Lily skipped along beside her, her blonde curls bouncing with each step, a mirror image of her father's features. "Can we try the new swings first, Mom?" Lily asked, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. Michelle nodded, adjusting her daughter's pink backpack on her shoulder. It was moments like these that made all the long hospital shifts worth it. As they reached the playground, Michelle couldn't help but notice a few curious glances from other parents. She was used to it by now, the subtle double takes, the confused expressions when people saw her dark skin next to Lily's fair complexion. Usually, most people would quickly realize their assumption was wrong and go about their business. But today was going to be different. "Higher, Mom, higher." Lily squealed as Michelle pushed her on the butterfly swing. The little girl's joy was infectious, and soon they were both laughing. Michelle had just started teaching Lily how to pump her legs to swing by herself when she noticed a woman in a floral dress and oversized sunglasses watching them intently from a nearby bench. The woman, who looked to be in her mid-50s, kept shifting in her seat, her attention fixed on Michelle and Lily. She was clutching her designer handbag tightly, her knuckles almost white. Every few seconds, she would look around as if searching for someone else who might share her concern. Michelle tried to focus on Lily, pointing out a family of ducks waddling near the pond and helping her daughter practice her swinging technique. But she could feel the woman's stare burning into her back. After 15 years of being a mother to a biracial child, Michelle had developed a sixth sense for when someone was about to make assumptions. "Look, Mom, I'm doing it." Lily called out proudly as she managed to swing by herself for the first time. Michelle clapped and cheered, momentarily forgetting about the watching woman. "That's wonderful, sweetie. You're getting so good at this." Their celebration was interrupted by the sound of high heels clicking on the pavement. The woman in the floral dress had left her bench and was now walking purposefully toward them, her phone held out in front of her like a shield. "Excuse me?" the woman said, her voice sharp and unnecessarily loud. "Is everything all right here?" Michelle felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression neutral for Lily's sake. She'd been through similar situations before, though usually not quite so confrontational. Her daughter slowed her swinging, sensing the tension in the air. "Yes, we're just enjoying the afternoon," Michelle replied calmly, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder as the little girl came to a stop beside her. "Is there something we can help you with?" The woman's lips pressed into a thin line as she looked between Michelle and Lily. "I've been watching you for a while," she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "I haven't seen you in this neighborhood before." "We live just 3 blocks away, on Maple Street," Michelle explained, keeping her voice steady despite the familiar frustration building in her chest. "We've been coming to this park for years." "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small and confused. She wrapped her arms around Michelle's waist, pressing close to her side. "Why does that lady looking at us like that?" The woman's eyes narrowed at Lily's words, and she raised her phone higher, clearly recording now. "I find that very hard to believe. I think it's best if we let the authorities sort this out." Other parents had started to notice the confrontation, some moving closer, others pulling their children away. Michelle could hear whispers starting, see phones being pulled out. But she stayed focused on keeping Lily calm while maintaining her own composure. Years of handling emergency situations in the pediatric ward had taught her the importance of staying level-headed, even when everything inside you wanted to scream. The woman in the floral dress, who later introduced herself as Barbara, was already dialing her phone while keeping her camera pointed at Michelle and Lily. Other families at the park had stopped their activities, creating an uncomfortable silence broken only by distant bird songs and the creaking of empty swings. "I'm calling the police," Barbara announced loudly, as if she wanted everyone in the park to hear. "Something's not right here, and I'm going to make sure this child is safe." Lily's grip on Michelle's waist tightened. "Mom, why does she want to call the police? Did we do something wrong?" Her voice trembled slightly, and Michelle could feel her daughter's heart racing. Michelle knelt down to meet Lily's eyes, keeping her voice gentle and steady. "No, sweetheart, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people make mistakes because they don't understand things properly. Everything's going to be okay." A young couple pushing a stroller nearby had stopped to watch. The woman whispered something to her partner, who nodded and started recording with his phone. Michelle wasn't sure if this was meant to help or harm her situation, but she focused on staying calm for Lily's sake. "Yes, I'm at Central Park," Barbara spoke into her phone, pacing back and forth. "There's a suspicious situation with a child. I've been watching them for 20 minutes, and something doesn't add up." She paused, listening to the dispatcher. "No, the child appears to be unharmed. But—" Michelle took a deep breath and spoke clearly, making sure others could hear. "I am Lily's mother. I have her birth certificate in my purse because we just came from her doctor's appointment. I can show you pictures of her as a baby, her first steps, her first day of school." "Don't move," Barbara interrupted, taking a step back. "Stay right where you are until the police arrive." More parents had gathered around now, forming a loose circle. Some were filming, others were whispering among themselves. A few looked uncomfortable, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "Mrs. Chen," Lily suddenly called out, waving at someone behind Barbara. "Mrs. Chen, tell her. Tell her that's my mom." Barbara turned to see an elderly Asian woman approaching from the direction of the community center. She walked with a slight limp, but moved purposefully toward the group. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Chen asked, her kind face creased with concern. "Michelle, Lily, is everything all right?" "She doesn't believe Mom is my mom," Lily explained before anyone else could speak. "She's calling the police on us." Mrs. Chen's expression hardened as she looked at Barbara. "I've known this family for 6 years. I teach Lily piano every Wednesday afternoon. Michelle is absolutely her mother." Barbara's grip on her phone loosened slightly, but she stood her ground. "Well, how can you be sure? They don't even look alike. I'm just trying to protect." "Protect who?" A deep voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a tall man in running clothes approaching the group. "I'm Dr. Thomas from City Hospital. I work with Dr. Anderson in pediatrics. What exactly are you trying to protect this child from? Her own mother?" Michelle felt a small wave of relief at seeing a familiar face, but the situation was far from over. Barbara was still recording, though her hand had started to shake slightly. I just thought." Barbara stumbled over her words, looking increasingly uncertain. "You just thought what?" Dr. Thomas pressed, his voice firm but controlled. "That because they don't share the same skin color, they couldn't possibly be mother and daughter. Do you realize how that sounds?" Lily tugged at Michelle's sleeve. "Mom, can we go home? I don't like this anymore." The sound of police sirens in the distance made Michelle's heart sink. She had hoped to resolve this without law enforcement involvement, but now they would have to stay and explain everything. She pulled Lily close, kissing the top of her head. "We'll go home soon, baby. First, we need to talk to the police and explain that everything's okay. Remember what we always say about being brave." Lily nodded against her mother's side. That being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared. A few of the watching parents smiled at Lily's words. Barbara had finally lowered her phone, though she still clutched it tightly, her knuckles white against the pink case. The police sirens were getting closer, and Michelle could see the flashing lights at the park entrance. 2 police cars pulled up to the park entrance, their lights flashing against the afternoon sun. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Chen stepped out of the first car, while 2 more officers emerged from the second vehicle. They approached the gathered crowd with measured steps, taking in the scene before them. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Rodriguez asked, her voice calm but authoritative. She looked between Barbara, who was still clutching her phone, and Michelle, who stood protectively beside Lily. Barbara stepped forward quickly. "I called about a suspicious situation with this child," she said, gesturing toward Lily. "I've been watching them, and something doesn't seem right." "Ma'am," Officer Chen interrupted gently, "let's start from the beginning. Can everyone take a step back and give us some space?" The crowd of onlookers reluctantly widened their circle. Michelle spoke up, keeping her voice steady. "My daughter and I were playing on the swings when this woman began recording us and called the police. She doesn't believe I'm Lily's mother because," she paused, taking a deep breath, "because we don't look alike." Lily, who had been quiet, suddenly reached into her pink backpack. "Mom, I have my school ID. It has your name on it as my emergency contact." She pulled out a slightly crumpled student ID card, holding it up proudly. Officer Rodriguez knelt down to Lily's level. "That's very helpful, sweetheart. Can you tell me about your mom?" "She's the best mom ever," Lily said without hesitation. "She's a children's doctor, and she helps sick kids get better. She makes the best chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays, and she knows all the words to every Disney song." Lily's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "And she always tells me that families are made of love, not just how people look." Mrs. Chen stepped forward again. "Officers, I can vouch for them. I've been Lily's piano teacher for years. I have videos of her recitals with both her parents in attendance." Dr. Thomas added, "And I can confirm that Dr. Anderson is a respected pediatrician at City Hospital. We've worked together for over a decade." Officer Chen turned to Barbara. "Ma'am, do you have any specific reason for concern besides their physical appearance?" Barbara's confidence seemed to waver. "Well, I just thought. They look so different, and you can never be too careful these days." "I have Lily's birth certificate right here," Michelle said, pulling it from her purse along with her hospital ID. "We just came from her annual checkup. I also have countless photos." She opened her phone to show a gallery full of pictures. Lily as a newborn in the hospital, her first steps, birthday parties, family vacations. Officer Rodriguez reviewed the documents while Officer Chen spoke quietly with some of the witnesses. The other 2 officers kept the growing crowd at a respectful distance. "Dr. Anderson," Officer Rodriguez finally said, "everything appears to be in order here. I apologize for any distress this situation has caused you and your daughter." Lily tugged at the officer's sleeve. "Does this mean we can go home now? Mom promised we'd bake cookies today." A gentle smile crossed Officer Rodriguez's face. "Yes, you can go home and make those cookies. Though I hope this experience doesn't spoil your time at the park completely." Barbara had grown increasingly quiet, her face flushed with embarrassment as the reality of her actions sank in. Several onlookers were shaking their heads disapprovingly, and a few were still recording. I suppose I made a mistake," Barbara stammered, finally lowering her phone completely. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to what?" Michelle asked quietly, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "You didn't mean to traumatize my daughter. To make her feel like she doesn't belong with her own mother. To teach her that she should be suspicious of families that look different from what you think is normal." The park had grown very quiet, with only the distant sound of birds and the gentle creaking of empty swings. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Officer Chen cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he addressed Barbara, "while your concern for child safety is admirable, Profiling families based on appearance is not acceptable. This incident could have serious consequences. As the tension at the park slowly began to dissipate, more people stepped forward to share their experiences with Michelle and Lily. A young mother pushing a stroller approached the officers, her phone displaying a community Facebook page. "Look," she said, turning her screen toward Officer Rodriguez. Dr. Anderson was featured in the local news last month for organizing a free vaccination drive in underserved neighborhoods. There's even a picture of her and Lily volunteering together. Mrs. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "She's not just a doctor. She's a pillar of our community. Last winter, when my arthritis was acting up, she drove Lily to my house for piano lessons so we wouldn't have to cancel." Barbara stood awkwardly to the side, her floral dress now wrinkled from nervous fidgeting. The reality of her actions was becoming increasingly clear as more people shared their stories. "Mom," Lily whispered, tugging at Michelle's sleeve. "Can I show them my science fair picture? The one where you helped me with my project?" Michelle smiled softly and pulled up another photo on her phone. There was Lily, beaming proudly next to a volcano experiment, with Michelle in her doctor's coat. They had come straight from her hospital shift to set up the display. "First place winner," Dr. Thomas commented with a grin. The whole pediatric ward was talking about it for weeks. Lily even came in to show us how it worked. A teenage girl who had been watching everything unfold stepped forward. "Dr. Anderson helped my little brother when he had pneumonia last year. She sat with my mom for hours, explaining everything in Spanish so she wouldn't feel scared or confused. She even checked on him during her lunch breaks." Officer Chen was taking notes, but his expression had softened considerably. The situation had evolved from a potential crime scene to what was clearly a community vouching for one of their own. Barbara's phone had long since disappeared into her purse, her earlier certainty replaced by visible discomfort. I didn't know," she stammered. "You have to understand, I was just trying to protect a child who was never in danger," Michelle finished for her, her voice firm but not unkind. "Instead, you taught my daughter that she needs to carry proof that she belongs with her own mother." Lily, who had been quietly observing everything, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, remember what you always tell your scared patients. That sometimes people act mean because they don't know better, but that doesn't mean we can't teach them." A collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Even the officers couldn't hide their smiles at the 8-year-old's wisdom. "Your daughter is absolutely right," Officer Rodriguez said, closing her notebook. "This could be a learning opportunity for everyone." Dr. Thomas checked his watch and cleared his throat. "Michelle, the hospital's diversity committee meets next Thursday. Perhaps this incident could help us develop better community outreach programs." A young father who had been recording everything spoke up. "I run a local parenting blog. Would you consider sharing your story? It might help other families who faced similar situations." The afternoon sun had started its descent, casting long shadows across the park. The same swings where the incident began now swayed gently in the breeze, empty but somehow less threatening than before. Michelle looked at her daughter, seeing strength and understanding in those young eyes that no child should have to develop so early. "What do you think, sweetheart? Should we help other families understand that love doesn't have to look the same in every family?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Yes, but can we still make those cookies first? I think everyone here could use a cookie right now." The tension that had gripped the park for the past hour finally broke as gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Barbara managed a small, shame-faced smile. Officer Chen closed his notebook. "I think we got everything we need here. Dr. Anderson, would you like to press charges?" By Monday morning, videos of the park incident had spread across local social media groups. The community's response was swift and overwhelming. The waiting room of City Hospital's pediatric ward was flooded with handmade cards, drawings, and notes of support for Dr. Anderson and Lily. "Look at this one, Mom." Lily held up a colorful drawing during their breakfast. It showed two stick figures, one tall with dark skin, one small with yellow hair, surrounded by hearts. It's from Katie in my class. She says her family doesn't match either, and she's proud of it. Michelle smiled, though her eyes were tired. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of phone calls, messages, and news reporters trying to get their story. The local news station had already run a segment titled Prejudice at the Park. A community responds. Her phone buzzed with another notification. The parenting blog that had shared their story was going viral, with thousands of comments pouring in from families across the country sharing similar experiences. Dr. Anderson, her assistant, poked her head into the office. There's something you need to see in the hospital lobby. Michelle followed her assistant downstairs, Lily skipping alongside them. As the elevator doors opened, they were met with an incredible sight. The entire lobby had been transformed into a makeshift art gallery. Dozens of photographs lined the walls, all showing diverse families in their community. We put this together overnight, explained Nancy, the head nurse. Every family here has a different story. Mixed-race families, adoptive families, foster families, they all wanted to show support. A group of hospital staff had gathered around one particular photo. It showed Michelle in her doctor's coat, treating a young patient while Lily sat nearby, reading a story to another child. The caption read, "Love makes a family." The mayor's office called. Dr. Thomas said, approaching them with a coffee in hand. They want to organize a community forum on family diversity. They're asking if you'd be willing to speak. Before Michelle could respond, the hospital director joined them. The incident has sparked an important conversation. 3 other hospitals have already called asking about our diversity training programs. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, look. There's Mrs. Chen." The elderly piano teacher was making her way through the crowd, supported by her daughter. "I canceled all my lessons today to be here," Mrs. Chen announced, pulling out a stack of papers. "These are letters from my students and their parents. Everyone wants you to know you're not alone." The local newspaper reporter, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up. "Dr. Anderson, would you mind if I quoted some of these letters? People need to hear these stories." A young mother, pushing a stroller, approached them. "I saw the video yesterday," she said softly. "I'm a single mom who adopted my daughter from a different country. We get those looks all the time. Seeing you stand up to that woman, it gave me courage." The hospital cafeteria staff had set up a special table with cookies and hot chocolate, reminiscent of the cookies Lily had mentioned wanting to bake. Someone had placed a sign that read, "Love comes in all colors," above the display. "Mom," Lily asked, munching on a cookie, "are you okay? You're crying." Michelle wiped her eyes, smiling. "These are happy tears, sweetheart. Sometimes when your heart is very full, it spills over a little." A notification popped up on Michelle's phone. Barbara had posted a public apology on the community Facebook page. It was long and seemed genuine, acknowledging her prejudice and promising to do better. The comments section was filled with people offering to help her learn and grow from this experience. The hospital security guard approached with a concerned look. "Dr. Anderson, there are 3 news vans in the parking lot. They're requesting interviews. Should I ask them to leave?" Dr. Thomas stepped in. "Actually, maybe we shouldn't. This could be a chance to reach even more families who need to hear this message." Lily squeezed her mother's hand. "Can I be in the interview too? I want to tell them about what you always say, that beauty isn't about matching, it's about love." The community center's main hall was packed to capacity. People stood along the walls, sat cross-legged on the floor, and crowded the doorways. The mayor had arranged this forum just 3 days after the park incident, and the response had exceeded everyone's expectations. Michelle stood at the podium, taking in the sea of faces before her. Lily sat in the front row between Mrs. Chen and Dr. Thomas, giving her mother a thumbs up. In the back corner, partially hidden behind a column, stood Barbara, who who had accepted the invitation to attend despite her obvious discomfort. "I never planned to be standing here today," Michelle began, her voice steady and clear. "Last Saturday, I was just a mom taking her daughter to the park. But sometimes life hands you moments that are bigger than yourself." She paused, looking down at the notes she'd prepared but hadn't needed. The words came naturally, straight from her heart. "My daughter asked me this morning why we're here. She said, 'Mom, shouldn't people already know that families can look different?' And she's right. They should. But sometimes people need help understanding things that seem obvious to others." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several parents hugged their children closer. "I could have pressed charges that day," Michelle continued. "I could have let anger and hurt guide my actions. But my daughter reminded me of something I tell my young patients. Sometimes people act unkindly because they don't know better, and teaching them is better than punishing them." In the audience, a teenage girl raised her hand. "Dr. Anderson, can I share something?" At Michelle's nod, she stood up. "I'm adopted. My parents are both white, and I'm Asian. Last year, someone called the police on us at a mall. I was so angry afterward, but seeing your story, it helps to know we're not alone." More hands went up. More stories poured out. A single father talked about raising his deceased best friend's children. A grandmother spoke about her multiracial grandchildren. Each story added another thread to the tapestry of their community. Barbara slowly made her way to the front, her hands shaking as she held the small piece of paper. I wrote something, if I may." Michelle nodded, stepping aside from the podium. "I've lived in this community for 30 years, Barbara began, her voice trembling. "I thought I knew everything about our neighborhood, about what families should look like. I was wrong. My actions last Saturday weren't about protecting anyone. They were about my own prejudices I didn't even realize I had." She turned to face Michelle and Lily directly. "I've spent the last few days thinking about the pain I caused you, about how many other families I might have judged without knowing their story. I'm here because I want to learn to do better." The room was silent, hanging on every word. Lily slipped out of her seat and walked to the podium, tugging gently on Barbara's sleeve. "It's okay," Lily said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Mom says everyone can learn to be better if they really want to. Do you really want to?" Barbara knelt down to Lily's level, tears in her eyes. "Yes, I really do." The tension in the room softened. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole hall joined in. Not for Barbara's past actions, but for the courage to acknowledge mistakes and commit to change. Dr. Thomas stepped up to share how the hospital was launching new initiatives: diversity training for staff, support groups for diverse families, and educational programs for the community. The mayor announced plans for a citywide celebration of family diversity, with photos and stories to be displayed in the park where it all began. As the forum continued, people began sharing contact information, forming support networks, and planning future meetings. What had started as a response to prejudice was transforming into a movement of understanding and acceptance. Michelle watched it all unfold, her heart full. A young boy approached her with a drawing. Stick figures of all colors, holding hands in a circle. "This is for your office," he said shyly, "so other kids know their families are okay too." 6 months had passed since that day at the park. The autumn leaves now painted the playground in shades of gold and red, but the changes in the community ran much deeper than the seasons. The same park that had witnessed the confrontation now hosted the town's first Family Diversity Festival. Families of all kinds gathered around colorful booths, sharing stories, food, and laughter. Children darted between the displays, their faces painted with rainbows and hearts. Michelle stood by a photo wall titled "Love Makes a Family," watching Lily guide younger children through the pictures. Her daughter had grown so much in these past months, not just in height, but in confidence and understanding. "Dr. Anderson." Barbara's voice carried across the crowd. She was helping set up a booth labeled Learning and Growing Together, a support group she'd started for people wanting to overcome their prejudices. Who would have thought that the woman who once called the police would now be leading workshops on acceptance? The new family support program at the hospital is doing amazing, Dr. Thomas reported, joining them with cups of hot chocolate. We've had requests from 5 other hospitals to share our training materials. The local elementary school had embraced change too. Lily's class project on what makes a family had inspired a whole new curriculum unit. Now, every classroom had a wall dedicated to family photos showing the beautiful diversity of their community. Mrs. Chen, still teaching piano, but now from a more accessible ground floor studio, waved from her booth where she was organizing the afternoon's multicultural music performance. Her arthritis hadn't improved, but the community had rallied to help her continue teaching. "Mom, look," Lily called out, running over with a newspaper. The front page showed their story, but it wasn't about the incident anymore. The headline read, "Local Community Leads the Way in Family Diversity Education." A young couple approached Michelle, pushing a stroller. "We just moved here because we heard about your community," the woman explained. "We're adopting a baby from a different background, and we wanted our child to grow up somewhere accepting." The police department had made changes too. Officers Rodriguez and Chen had developed a new training program about handling bias-motivated calls. They'd even invited Michelle and Lily to speak at their diversity workshops. Barbara, who'd been arranging pamphlets at her booth, walked over with tears in her eyes. "I found this in my mailbox this morning," she said, holding out a handmade card. Inside were messages from dozens of community members, thanking her for showing that people can change. Sometimes the best lessons come from our biggest mistakes, Barbara reflected, watching children of all colors play together on the swings where the incident began. "I never thought I'd say this, but that was the most important day of my life." The mayor arrived with exciting news. Their community program was being featured in a national magazine about social change. But more importantly, neighboring towns were reaching out to start their own diversity initiatives. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing to a new family looking lost by the entrance. "Mom, can we go say hi? They look like they might need a friend." Michelle smiled, remembering how far they'd come. The pain of that day hadn't disappeared completely. Such things never do. But it had transformed into something beautiful and powerful. As they walked toward the new family, Michelle heard snippets of conversation from around the park. Parents sharing resources, children making plans for playdates, teachers exchanging ideas for inclusive lessons, and community leaders planning future events. A photographer from the local paper captured the moment. Michelle and Lily welcoming the new family, Barbara sharing stories at her booth, Mrs. Chen directing her multicultural choir, and dozens of families just being themselves, without fear or judgment. "You know what, Mom?" Lily said as they helped the new family find their way around. That mean day turned into something really good. Michelle hugged her daughter close. "That's because we chose to turn pain into positive change, sweetheart. Sometimes the hardest moments can lead to the most beautiful transformations." The autumn sun cast long shadows across the park, but unlike that day 6 months ago, these shadows held no fear, only the promise of more growth, more understanding, and more love in their little corner of the world.